Legendary rapper, the Notorious B.I.G. has been dead longer now than he was alive.
Rap star Tupac Shakur died last night after a brief life in a rough business.
The murder of Christopher Wallace, known to the world as the Notorious B.I.G., remains one of the most haunting, unsolved cases in American history. On March 9, 1997, at approximately 12:47 in the morning, the 24-year-old rap superstar was gunned down in a drive-by shooting at the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue in Los Angeles. He had just left an after-party following the Soul Train Music Awards, sitting in the passenger seat of a GMC Suburban when a lone gunman, in what witnesses variously described as a black Chevrolet Impala, white Toyota Land Cruiser, or green Impala, pulled alongside and opened fire with a 9mm pistol. 4 bullets struck Wallace, with a fatal round entering through his right hip and tearing through his colon, liver, heart, and upper left lung before lodging in his shoulder. He was pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center just 28 minutes later. To understand why Wallace was murdered, you have to go back to his roots in Brooklyn, where his life was shaped by the harsh realities of street crime. Born in 1972 and raised in Clinton Hill, adjacent to the notorious Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, Wallace grew up around Fulton Street, where drug dealing, gambling, and alcoholism were part of daily life. Despite excelling in English and attending the same high school as future hip-hop legends Jay-Z and Busta Rhymes, Wallace dropped out at age 16 to deal drugs full-time. His early criminal history included weapons possession, probation violations, and dealing crack cocaine, culminating in a 9-month stint in a North Carolina jail in the early 1990s. What's particularly striking is that Wallace never fully left his criminal life behind, even after achieving global superstardom. In 1995, he faced charges for robbery and aggravated assault. The following year, at the height of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry, his legal troubles escalated dramatically. He was arrested for assaulting 2 fans with a baseball bat and later charged with possessing marijuana and firearms during a police incident at his New Jersey home. These ongoing arrests confirmed that his gangster rap persona wasn't purely artistic fabrication, but continued reality. This failure to establish the safety net of celebrity kept him tethered to the volatile street ecosystem that would ultimately claim his life. Wallace's authenticity gave him credibility in the burgeoning gangster rap genre, but it also made him a target. His debut album, Ready to Die, released in 1994 through Bad Boy Records, received both critical acclaim and massive commercial success, effectively restoring East Coast hip-hop's national prominence at a time when the West Coast dominated the industry. This commercial ascendancy intensified competition with Death Row Records, the West Coast powerhouse led by Suge Knight. Wallace wasn't viewed merely as a musical competitor, but as a critical commercial threat whose elimination could serve as a means of market control and territorial dominance. The murder cannot be understood in isolation. It was the second brutal act in a sequence of targeted killings resulting from the increasingly violent rivalry between Bad Boy Records and Death Row Records. The conflict's most incendiary point revolved around the personal animosity between Wallace and Tupac Shakur, fueled by the contentious relationship between their label heads, Sean Combs and Suge Knight. Everything changed after November 30th, 1994, when Tupac was shot in the lobby of Bad Boy's Quad recording studio in New York. Although Wallace and Combs were upstairs during the attack, Tupac became convinced they had orchestrated it. Viewing the ambush as calculated betrayal, this permanently escalated tensions, transforming verbal jabs into a conflict where violence became increasingly accepted. The rivalry reached its lethal boiling point with Tupac's murder in Las Vegas on September 7, 1996. He was shot while riding in a car driven by Suge Knight, who was also injured in the attack. The drive-by shooting, occurring 6 months before Wallace's own fate, suggested a pattern of organized execution. For Death Row affiliates, the damage was immediate and decisive. Despite ambiguity surrounding the shooting's link to the coastal rivalry, Death Row associates universally assumed that someone from Bad Boy was unquestionably to blame. This widespread, emotionally charged assumption created an environment of lethal anticipation, positioning retaliation as an inevitable act of justice. The rivalry had transitioned from music conflict to organized vendetta, utilizing organized crime elements like the Bloods and Crips as their operational base. Wallace's presence in Los Angeles in March 1997 to promote his double album, Life After Death, and present an award at the Soul Train Music Awards represented a fatal strategic vulnerability. He was operating in hostile territory, death row's home turf. At the precise moment tensions were at their absolute peak, officials immediately suspected Suge Knight's involvement in a conspiracy for Wallace's killing, mirroring the suspicions that followed Tupac's death. Law enforcement and industry insiders understood these weren't random acts of street violence, but coordinated retaliatory strikes driven by corporate and territorial battle between the coasts. The investigation was compromised from the start by contradictory witness accounts and forensic confusion. One crucial detail stood out. The shooter was described as wearing a blue suit and bow tie, but even more damaging was the fundamental conflict regarding the assailant's vehicle. Initial reports identified a dark-colored or black Chevrolet Impala SS, while other accounts suggested a white Toyota Land Cruiser. Later investigations revealed that witnesses furthest from the shooting often described the vehicle as black, while those closest to the scene claimed it was green or aqua blue. This fundamental conflict immediately allowed two dramatically divergent investigative narratives to take root, paralyzing the initial search for a unified truth. The autopsy report itself became a source of controversy. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office maintained a security hold on the 23-page report for over 15 years, finally releasing it in December 2012. The LAPD was forced to issue a formal apology to the Wallace family for failing to warn them about the planned release, claiming premature disclosure was due to an administrative error. This handling, coming many years after the event, potentially indicated an institutional effort to generate new leads when initial efforts had stalled. Two competing theories have dominated the investigation for decades, each detailed yet mutually exclusive, dividing investigative resources and generating widespread skepticism about LAPD integrity. The first theory, championed by retired LAPD Detective Russell Poole and journalist Randall Sullivan, alleged that Suge Knight conspired with former LAPD officer David Mack to orchestrate Wallace's assassination. Mack, who would later become associated with the widespread Rampart Division scandal exposing extensive police misconduct, allegedly enlisted a Southern California mortgage broker named Amir Muhammad as the hitman. The theory drew circumstantial support from the fact that Mack owned a black Chevrolet Impala SS, matching some initial witness accounts. However, the foundation of this police conspiracy theory was fatally undermined by the unreliability of its primary source. The core evidence linking Mack, Muhammad, and Knight originated from a paid informant known as Psycho Mike, who offered information in exchange for early release from custody. In 2005, during a deposition related to the wrongful death lawsuit, Psycho Mike definitively recanted most of his information, admitting that what he told the FBI and LAPD was predominantly hearsay. He confessed to having no evidence to support the claim that Knight and Mack planned the murder. Furthermore, he revealed he was a paranoid schizophrenic who suffered memory lapses and had never met the alleged hitman before picking his picture out of a lineup, stating he had merely guessed based on Muhammad's short hair and Islamic name. A competing and arguably more forensically robust theory was advanced by retired LAPD detective Greg Kading, who headed a federalized task force investigating the murder. Kading's model shifted focus away from corrupt police officers and placed blame squarely on Suge Knight and his gang affiliates. Kading alleged that Knight orchestrated Wallace's murder in direct and calculated revenge for Tupac's death 6 months earlier. His team identified the triggerman as Wardell Poochie Faust, a Mob Peru Blood gang member. A key witness alleged that Knight paid Faust $13,000 to carry out the hit. Kading's model successfully addressed the primary physical anomalies that plagued earlier investigations. His task force identified the vehicle as a green Impala, noting that witnesses closest to the scene concurred on the green color. This vehicle reportedly matched a car Fusey was known to drive, allegedly supplied by night. Kading also offered a credible, street-centric explanation for the shooter's unusual attire. He stated that Los Angeles gang members, specifically Mob Piru Bloods, were known to dress in Nation of Islam attire as camouflage for conducting home invasion robberies and shootings. While the task force couldn't definitively determine if Foose was a member of the Fruit of Islam, this explanation integrated physical witness testimony into a plausible gang-related murder scenario. Despite identifying the alleged killer, Wardell Pucci, Faust was murdered in an unrelated incident, effectively eliminating the possibility of obtaining a confession or securing a criminal conviction. The fact that the murder remains officially unsolved, despite two detailed theories naming specific perpetrators and masterminds, confirms a deep institutional inability rooted in compromised evidence, witness issues, and police internal conflict that has permanently prevented legal resolution. Following the investigative stagnation, the pursuit of justice transitioned into a decade-long legal battle led by Wallace's family against the Los Angeles Police Department. The Wallace family repeatedly filed wrongful death lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles. Their core legal contention was that the LAPD knew or reasonably should have known that Wallace was at extreme risk due to alleged criminality surrounding death row records and its affiliated gangs. They alleged that corrupt officers were involved in his death and that the LAPD subsequently covered up this involvement. The lawsuit specifically named David Mack alongside other officers, alleging they conspired to murder Wallace. These allegations gained considerable traction due to the backdrop of the Rampart scandal, which exposed widespread LAPD misconduct, including falsified evidence and perjury, leading to 106 overturned criminal convictions and costing the city an estimated $125 million. The proximity of officers named in the Wallace case to the Rampart disgrace created a credibility vacuum, making the family's claims of police collusion with gang elements tragically plausible. The litigation stretched out for years, becoming one of the longest-running and most contentious celebrity cases in history. The lawsuits escalated to $500 million from the city. While financial compensation was part of the claim, the family consistently maintained their primary objective was to find out the truth about the killing, but their legal pursuit was ultimately thwarted by procedural obstacles. In December 2007, a United States district judge granted summary judgment in favor of the city, ruling that the Wallace family had failed to comply with a California state law requiring them to provide notice of their claim within 6 months of Wallace's death. This procedural dismissal was a decisive blow. By prioritizing a legal technicality, the court shielded the state agency from a factual determination of liability regarding serious allegations of police conspiracy. Although the family refiled the suit in 2008, the case against the city was eventually dismissed in 2010. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation that ran from 1997 to 2005, but ultimately closed its case without securing actionable charges against the LAPD or its officers. The closure of the federal investigation, combined with dismissal of civil lawsuits, effectively exhausted all traditional legal avenues for resolution. The investigation was crippled almost immediately. Early evidence collection suffered from flawed witness triage, leading to contradictory accounts of the shooter's vehicle. The initial investigation relied heavily on a primary informant who was later discredited as schizophrenic and relying on hearsay. The investigative process was politically polluted by the concurrent Rampart scandal, which destroyed public trust in the LAPD's ability to investigate its own. Although the subsequent Kading task force advanced a credible theory identifying Pucci Faust as the contract killer paid by Suge Knight, this avenue of justice was closed when Faust died, removing the possibility of obtaining essential testimony. The dual assassinations of Christopher Wallace and Tupac Shakur within 6 months of each other inflicted deep trauma on the hip-hop community. The deaths were viewed by peers as nearly the end of rap, symbolizing the lethal peak of the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. Their murders ultimately forced a retreat from destructive street-centric conflicts, leading to an artistic truce that redefined the genre's direction. The deaths forced the music industry to retreat from life-threatening dynamics created by mixing criminal authenticity with commercial endeavor. Wallace's artistic legacy remained undiminished by his death. His final album, Life After Death, released just weeks following his passing, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, cementing his position as one of the greatest rappers of all time. His influence remains vast, cited by contemporary artists for his unique storytelling, distinctive lyrical delivery, and narrative style. His contributions have been recognized through his induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2020 and the renaming of a street in his native Brooklyn. The unsolved murder remains a permanent cold case and powerful cultural symbol of justice delayed and denied. The enduring narrative surrounding the case is that truth likely lies in the overlap of organized gang violence and commercial rivalry as suggested by the Kading model. However, the shadow of institutional complicity created by LAPD's failure to effectively investigate and by undeniable corruption exposed in the Rampart Division has rendered the case permanently ambiguous in the public eye. The twin unsolved murders provide a dark cautionary postscript to the gangster rap era, illustrating destructive consequences when artistry based on criminal authenticity crosses into real-world organized conflict without police accountability